Okay, you guys, I am driving back from a very nice weekend down in the DMV area, and I had a discussion with one of my friends about just travel in general. And one of the things that we were talking about was places that we've been and different things like that. And she was saying how her son had never been to Virginia, which I thought was really interesting because they live in Maryland and very close to Virginia. And I said, well, you guys have never been to DC? And you gotta pass through Arlington from where they are. They gotta pass through Arlington to get to DC. And she's like, well, yeah, but I guess he's never really set foot on the soil of Virginia. And I'm like, okay. So here is my issue. Another friend a few weeks ago had this whole conversation about whether or not her brother could claim that he had been to certain countries if he had only been to the airport of those countries. Now, I personally, as being somebody who travels a lot, travel enthusiast, I am very much on the side of going just through a country, like the airport part of it, but not actually being outside of the airport isn't really legit in counting that country as a place that you have been. I think you could say I've been to the airport there, but I don't think that that's like the same as saying that, oh yeah, I visited this country. I know that there was a time when I was traveling to Spain, and I had a layover in England, and it was a very long layover, and I intentionally left the airport. I mean, it was like kind of an in-between where it was long enough that it was like there was a significant amount of time, but it was short enough that you could theoretically just stay in the airport. But I intentionally was like, no, I want to say that I have been to the United Kingdom. So I intentionally left the airport, went out into the streets of London, did like a tour and like did a whole bunch of stuff. And it was less than 24 hours, but I felt that it was important to actually be outside of the airport in order to count that personally. Now, I have subsequently been to the UK again, even, that's my GPS, even without that. So I've been to the UK besides that one time. But I think that if I had just gone for that one time, having gone outside of the airport would have counted. But had I only stayed in the airport, I don't think that I would have counted that. Now, I know some people differ in this, but that's personally, I feel like airports don't count. However, when we're talking about driving, I think that driving does count. So if you have driven through a place, I think it's unquestionable that you can count a place if you are the driver. If you are the driver of the car and like you're looking at sights and you're looking around and you're like traveling, because there are some places that are, especially like in the western United States, where there are these roadside attractions and different things like that, and you can go and sightsee and detour specifically to see these things. And I definitely think that even if you never physically got out of the car, I think that you still can count that. I think you can. The only thing that is sort of a caveat with driving that I don't really know whether or not I would count it or not is if you are like just a passenger and you're like asleep. So let's say you are in a Greyhound bus, or you're in some type of coach bus that was even a chartered bus or something with a group, and you're just like sleeping and you are not participating in the journey in any significant way. I'm on the fence. I feel like I can be convinced either way. I think that a good argument can be made either way. I could probably be persuaded. I could be persuaded one way or the other. But for the most part, I think that if you are awake and you are actively participating in the trip, even as a passenger, I think you can count having been to that state. I am similar to the whole sleeping through a state. I am similarly on the fence when it comes to an Amtrak situation. Like you're driving or you're riding on the train through a state. I don't know how I would technically feel about that. I think that's another one that I could probably be convinced one way or another. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if I would say, like, if you just did not stop, you didn't get out, you didn't do anything, but you were just on the train and the train's just passing through, can you say I've been to that state? Nah. I'm leaning towards no. That is not necessarily my final answer, but that is where I'm kind of leaning to. So, if anybody else has any thoughts on what they believe in terms of airports, number one, which personally I don't think that airports count. I think you got to go outside the airport. Number two, driving through. Do you think that driving through counts or not? Passenger or driver, does it make a difference? Does it make a difference if you're awake or asleep? Awake or asleep. And also trains, if you're on a train just as a passenger, clearly not as a conductor. I don't think I have any friends who are conductors of trains, but if you are a passenger on a train, do you get to count that as you having been to a place simply because it has driven through that place? I don't know. I'm trying to think, because I have been on trains now. I've been on trains in Europe, and if you have traveled in Europe, you know that the countries themselves are pretty small. As a matter of fact, many of the countries in Europe are smaller than many of the states in the United States. And so if you're on a train from one country to another, you technically many times will pass through several different countries in transit on the train. And I cannot recall, it's been quite a while since I've been on a train in Europe. I don't know if you had to show your passport. I don't think so. I don't think that there was any type of need to present your passport to the people as you were going through the different countries on the train, because I think that would kind of, in a way, sort of make a difference. That would definitely, to me, sort of tip the scales, because if you did indeed have to stop and show a passport, then I think that could be legitimately being able to say, hey, this person has visited this country, because we clearly had to have gotten some documentation from them for being on this train. So I think that if there was a case where you had to stop and show your passport, you got to stamp your passport, or at least had to present your passport, I think that would tip my scales to saying, yes, that does count. Part of the reason why I don't think it counts with an airport is simply for that reason, because you don't have to, if you're just like in transit from one international point to another international point, you don't have to go out of the airport through customs and everything and get your passport stamped and all that other kind of stuff, and then come back through in order to catch your flight to another international destination. So for that reason, if you're not even having to pass through customs, you don't have to deal with immigration services, you don't get a stamp in your passport, none of that, to me, that kind of makes it like, nah, you didn't visit, you didn't go there. Just like the fact that going from the United States, the continental United States, going to Alaska, you have to pass through over Canada. But does that mean that you visited Canada? No, you just passed over it. Even if, I don't know if there are connecting flights through Canada, not 100% sure about that. I'm sure that you probably could get a connecting flight through Canada. And in that circumstance, you probably would, I don't know. I have never flown from the continental United States to Alaska through Canada. And I don't know if they would let you do that without having a passport. They probably wouldn't let you do that without having a passport, simply for the reason that you could theoretically leave and not get on the connecting flight to Alaska, and you could like leave and get out at Canada. So they probably would never let you leave the continental United States on such a flight without having a passport, even if your final destination is Alaska. But at the same time, if you really did legitimately just make the connection, you would not have to get your passport stamped or present yourself to the Canadian immigration authorities. And so for that reason, it's still not, I don't think you're not visiting Canada. You haven't actually gone there. But listen, let me know what you think. What do you think counts? What do you think doesn't count? All right.